Call the Honourable Member Kennedy Graham. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Chairman. This is the government whose 2014 estimates contain a time bomb of fiscal deficit over the next 2 decades through a failure in carbon budgeting. This is the government whose climate policy is a mess. It has paltry targets with no plan to attain them. It has weak policy settings, so emitters have no incentive to change. And that, Minister, will kill the golden goose. But even worse is the failure to convey to the taxpayer the fiscal costs that its climate policy will impose on future generations. The ETS, under current settings, aspires to manage fiscal risk primarily through forestry. The harvesting of trees is therefore fully priced. But the impact of the ETS on other sectors is softened by compensation and gifting of units and the exclusion of an entire sector that makes up half of our emissions. In 1992, New Zealand undertook to reduce emissions. Since then, its emissions have soared and are projected to continue to do so out to 2050. What is the fiscal effect of that? New Zealand has committed to 3 emission targets, 2008 to 12, 2020 and 50. By drawing straight lines between these targets, the government sets a primitive kind of national carbon budget. It calculates the annual emissions within those lines and then compares the limits with the projected emissions to find the excess. For the period 2013 to 50, Treasury projects that under current policy settings, excess emissions over the period will total around about 1 billion tonnes of emissions. Net emissions will more than double the government's target in 2050. One way or another, Mr. Chairman, this excess has to be paid for. This is the government that refused to enter a binding commitment under Kyoto 2, so we face no financial penalty if we fail and exceed our 2020 target. But after 2020, there will certainly be an international carbon price of some kind, and it will rise fast. It cannot be otherwise. The British Climate Commission assumes that international prices will rise from about US $50 to $150 a tonne during that decade. There will be a binding obligation on emission limits by then and a financial penalty of some kind for exceeding them. At $25 a tonne, the external carbon budget deficit for New Zealand will amount to maybe $30 billion. Imagine the fiscal hurdles on the next generation when we might be paying up to 6 times that price. In 2 months, voters choose which party will govern for the next 3 years. They have 2 considerations: security for themselves and a future for their kids. This is the government that flaunts a reduction of current account deficit next year and ignores the future. The fiscal debt from current climate policy will be simply horrendous, a major financial hemorrhage in the 2020s. And because our accounting methods are inadequate, this is hidden from the taxpayer and the voter. The principle of carbon responsibility is lost on this government. The Public Finance Act requires a government to manage fiscal risk with prudence. How is the public going to judge the government on that basis? This is the government that misrepresents the facts to the public. Over the past month, it has derided the Green Party's proposal for a carbon tax, claiming that our tax would be 5 times the global price. What pure rubbish. There is no single global price. There is a range of international prices. So how does the green price level compare? The green proposal is for US $22 a tonne for carbon dioxide and 11 for biological emissions. So how does this compare with international prices? Well, there is China, Quebec, California and France at $10. Then there is the UK at 16, Australia 22, Finland 48, Switzerland at 68, Tokyo at 95 and Sweden at $168. So our proposal sits very comfortably within the carbon price range overseas. This is the government whose estimates, along with its spin, are misleading, tendentious and dangerous.
The question is that vote environment stand part of the schedules. Those of that opinion, please say aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that primary industries stand part of the schedules.
Mr. Chair.
I call the Honourable Minister Nathan Guy.
Mr. Chair, it's great to take a